Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and strength coach, and I specialize in vestibular disorders. Welcome to my channel, The Steady Coach. Today we're going to be talking about a particular symptom that people have been asking me about. And we're going to talk about some ways that you might be able to help yourself out with this particular symptom. And that symptom is the perception of the ground being bouncy, squashy, or mushy when you walk on it. So I've heard this described as trampoline walking, marshmallow walking, or just feeling like things aren't quite right coming from the bottom of your feet. So let's talk first about why this happens and why this makes sense in the context of neural circuit dizziness. And as usual, if you're watching this video and you're new on my channel, I want you to first make sure that there is nothing medically wrong that explains your symptoms. So this video is geared toward people who've already had medical testing done and who know that what they're suffering from is chronic dizziness symptoms related to a neural circuit, or in other words, central nervous system mistake. So if you'd like more information on how to know if you have neural circuit dizziness, if you've already had medical testing done, you can see the video I will link to below in the description and up above. So trampoline walking, why does it happen? So to understand this, we need to understand how the balance system works. So the balance system relies on three senses: information from your eyes, so your vision, information from your ears, so in other words, your vestibular system, and information from your sense of touch or proprioception. We've talked about this in previous videos, and we're going to go into a little more depth on the third today. But first, what's important to understand is that normally your brain balances information coming in from all three of these senses in a very specific way depending on its predictions. So as I've said many times on my channel, your brain doesn't respond directly to outside information. It predicts what's going to happen, and then it compares small bits of sensory information coming in to see if its predictions were correct. So you can think of these three components of the balance system like legs on a stool, but they're not all equal in size. Generally, your brain is going to use more of one sense than the other in each particular situation, based on its predictions. This is a normal process. Now, what happens with a vestibular disorder is that the brain tends to use less of one sense than it should. In other words, its predictions aren't quite right, and so it accidentally or erroneously uses more information from one sense than it should, while perhaps ignoring or using less information from another sense. Most typically with vestibular disorders, the brain will start to over-rely on vision. And there are a lot of theories about why this happens. One of the things that I talk about a lot on my channel is that having chronic dizziness is associated with this fight or flight mode or anxiety or danger type of response. And in those situations, our vision tends to sharpen, so we could potentially run away or fight something that was dangerous. So my view is that may be one of the contributors to why vision tends to become so dominant. And I have a whole video on the effects of vision dominance. You can see that also in the video description below, or I will link to it above. But we haven't really talked in depth in my videos about the role of touch or proprioception. So to simplify this, frequently I will say that we're using the sense of touch, but it's really not just touch that the brain is using to help you balance. So touch refers to, you're being able to sense that something is brushing up against you or something's applying pressure to you. But actually your proprioceptive system includes touch, but is not just touch. It also includes sensors within your joints and in the connective tissues between muscles and joints that help relate how quickly you're moving, what angle you're moving at, how much load is on you, and the relationship between joints. So that is a lot of information. And all of that information is collected by these sensors all over your body, and sent up to the brain, where the brain can then sort through that information and figure out what it should do with it. To complicate things further, there's also a reflex called the VSR. That's the vestibulospinal reflex. And that refers to the reflex that connects your ears to your spinal cord and therefore also to your what we call motor neurons, which is the outgoing nerve tracts that help your body move. So when the vestibular system sends information down via this vestibulospinal reflex, it influences how you move. Okay, so you can already see how there are two components here that if they go wrong, the brain is going to have some trouble using your sense of touch correctly. First, if your vestibular organs aren't working quite right, or the brain isn't using nerve information from them correctly, the information from your ears won't be coordinated with the information going out to your limbs and other parts of your body that are helping you move. In other words, you're gonna feel uncoordinated. The other way this can go wrong is all that sensory information coming up to the brain might not be used or integrated correctly by the brain if it doesn't have correct predictions. In other words, if your brain is currently wired to rely a lot on vision, it's not really sure what's going on with the ears, and it's kind of confused about what's going on with your sense of touch, it's not actually going to use the information coming in from your sense of touch or your proprioceptive system. When it gets that information, it's going to lead to strange perceptions. So perhaps marshmallow walking, trampoline walking, etc. So the solution here is twofold. Again, as we talked about here on my channel, I'm talking to people who have neural circuit dizziness. And in my opinion, and the opinion of many who work in my field in psychophysiological disorders, the reason that your brain is using these weird templates, the reason your brain has this circuit that's not allowing it to use information correctly is because of stress. And stress, of course, being a very large term that in my world typically includes things like emotional issues or emotional repression, conflicts, past trauma, and unresolved situations in your life. And if you're new to my channel, that may sound really weird, so I will link above and in the video description to a video where I go into a little more depth on those things. So in my opinion, the very first thing you should be doing if you have this trampoline walking, marshmallow walking, or unsteadiness that's not explained by any kind of medical condition is to take an honest look at your life and see what might be going on. And my entire channel is devoted to this, so you can find many videos on here that will help you key in on what might be the stress cause of some of your symptoms. And part of this process is also learning not to fear or react to your symptoms so strongly. And I've said this before, don't blame yourself if you find yourself super anxious or fearful about your symptoms. Doubt and fear are baked into this because, as I said previously, the fight or flight response, or that threat mode or danger mode response, is what sets this off in the first place. So your threat mode in your body will not be effective if you don't really quickly get with the program. So these symptoms are designed to give you fear and anxiety. So that's built in with this syndrome of neural circuit dizziness. That said, one of the most important things you can learn is to be less reactive to your symptoms. That alone, in many cases, will reduce symptoms. My favorite way to do this is something called somatic tracking. I have a video here on YouTube. Again, I will link to it below and above. But I also have a track called Somatic Walking. And you can use the guided track a couple times to do this. But once you understand the method, this is something you can apply as you're walking if you're having this sensation. And basically, it teaches you to be just more agnostic about your symptoms. In other words, to be less reactive and more just neutral about them. And when you do that, that very quickly reduces that fear response that's keeping those sensations going. So in my very biased opinion, I think that the first thing that I just talked about is the main thing you need to work on, because I have seen clients recover from doing those things. However, if you want to build in a little bit of rehabilitation exercise to help your brain along, you can do that. And I'm going to give you some suggestions and ideas for how to do that today. But before we get started on those, I want to tell you first explicitly, I want you to be a B- or C+ student on these exercises if you choose to do them. First of all, you do not have to do them. Just walking or doing activities like yoga, tai chi, or qigong are just as effective as rehabilitative exercises. And I have seen other people get better without doing any exercises or specific exercises at all. But if you choose to do these, your primary job is to prevent your brain from paying extra attention to your symptoms. So this isn't something I want you doing 20 times a day. And it's not something I want you to spend a whole lot of time and brain power on. It's something to help train your body and strengthen the connections between your proprioceptive system and your brain so it can use that information correctly to help you balance. But the last thing we want is for you to increase your fear and preoccupation with the symptoms. That said, let's get started on some of the exercises that might help with this particular complaint. Okay, so for this series of exercises, you're going to be standing, and I want you to choose your position. So the easiest position, so level 1, would be standing with a nice wide base of support, or if you need it, level 1A would be to hold onto something lightly for support. Okay? From here, you can take a hip width distance stance. That's a little bit harder. You can put your feet together, that's harder yet, or you can take what we call a narrow staggered stance. So with your feet hip width distance apart, you're going to take a step forward with one foot, and that heel is going to be in line with your toes. Okay? Finally, once you've gotten to this one, you can head into what we call a tandem stance. So toe directly to heel, like you're standing on a tightrope. I'm about to fall over here, so if this is challenging, that's good. And finally, to make this even more challenging, or any position more challenging, you can cross your arms rather than letting them be at your sides. So this is going to be the hardest stance that you're going to work on. Okay, so now let's talk about exercises you can do in your chosen position. So the first exercise is just standing in your position for 30 seconds. After that, exercise number 2 is a figure 8 with your arms. So you're going to pick your position, and you're going to clasp your arms, hold them out straight in front of you, and you're going to make a figure 8. Okay? As you make your figure 8 bigger, this gets harder. Okay? So play around with that and progress your exercise by making your figure 8 harder. Of course, ultimately, you're going to want to be in this tandem stance, making your large figure 8s. And I'm about to fall over, so if this is hard for you, you're doing a great job. Okay? So you're going to do, for that exercise, you're going to be doing 10 to 15 to each direction. The third exercise is a head nod and a head shake. So it's a no and it's a yes. And this isn't a stabilization exercise or a gaze stabilization exercise. So you don't have to move super quick and small. You can move a little bit bigger. Okay, so you're shaking your head no, you're nodding your head yes, and you're going to do that in your chosen position. Again, you can always cross your arms to make it harder. And ultimately, you're going to be in this tandem stance. And see, look at that, I'm falling over. You're going to be in this tandem stance, arms crossed, and you're going to be shaking your head no, and you're going to be nodding your head yes. Okay, very, very challenging. Next exercise is the same thing, but with your eyes closed. So you're going to, again, pick your chosen position, and you might find that for this particular exercise, since this is much harder, you might need to pull it back a little and come back to a slightly easier position. You're going to close your eyes, and again, you can cross your arms to make it more challenging, and you're going to shake your head no and nod your head yes. So ultimately, you're going to be ending up in this tandem position. I will try not to fall over on video. Arms crossed, eyes closed, and shake your head no and nod your head yes. Very, very challenging. Okay, so that is the first exercise. The second exercise is something we call tandem walking. So basically, this is where you essentially walk on a tightrope. So you're going to put one heel to your back toe, okay, and you're going to just walk. Okay, so this is level 1. You're just going to walk. Arms can be out to your sides, and you can use your vision wherever you want it and just walk the tightrope. Okay, when you're ready to make that a little more challenging, what you're going to do is cross your arms. So you lose your arm balance there. So you're gonna walk with your arms crossed. And again, your gaze can be wherever you want it to be. Okay? You can play with your gaze also as a progression. Some people find it easier to look at the floor, while some people find it easier to look straight ahead. So you can use that as an additional little progression there as well. At this point, you have some options. Some of these things are going to be easier for you than others, so play around with what's good for you. From here, I like to progress to what I call a suitcase carry, which is when you have something in one arm, not the other. But if you need to, you can start with something in both arms to help stabilize you. So I've got my kettlebells in my hand, I'm taking my tandem position, and you don't need to use anything heavy like what I'm using, it's just what I had on hand. So you could use something nice and light, that's fine. And you're gonna walk down that tightrope. Okay, and then the suitcase, when you're ready, you're gonna hold that object in just one hand, so it's really gonna be trying to pull you off balance while you're doing this tandem walking. And again, you don't need to use anything heavy like a kettlebell, it's just what I happen to have around me. You can use a grocery bag, you can use a jug of milk, whatever you've got handy. You can also experiment with head turns or nods yes while you're doing your tandem walk. So you're going to do your heel toe again, and while you're doing that, you're going to be coordinating this side-to-side movement. Now notice I have my hands at my side. If I wanted to make it more challenging, I'd put my hands across my chest. And same thing for the nod yes, same thing. This third exercise is another proprioception exercise. So for this one, you're going to want 3 objects on the floor in front of you in this rainbow shape. Now this is a little more advanced, so for those of you who find you can't use a rainbow shape like this, you can just use one object in front of you without moving side to side. What you're going to do is you're going to stand, you're going to pick up one foot, and you're going to tap to one, tap to the middle, tap to the side. And you're not going to let your foot rest down on the floor between unless you have to. So again, easier would be tap, rest, tap, rest, tap, rest. But if you can do that like I did without stopping, that's ideal. And you're going to do that in both directions with both feet. To make this even more challenging, you can actually recruit a friend to tell you which one to touch. So they could say 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, or 3 o'clock, and then you have to be ready to move. There's what we call a reactive component. So you have to react to what the other person is saying. I hope that was helpful for you guys. You're welcome to try out these exercises if they resonated with you, but again, remember that in general, with neural circuit dizziness, it's not about exercises, it's about resolving the stress and anxiety that are underneath the symptoms. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. And again, if you liked this video, you found it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. I will talk to you guys soon.